not, in spite of being a speaker, I usually get up on stage with Chris Marie, and that helps me relax. Having said that, I said yes to this because I think it's an amazing opportunity, and I couldn't think of a better opportunity to be in front of my hometown, so to speak. So I'm going to talk to you tonight about something I'm passionate about, which is I think business is personal. And I think when you live in a small town, it's challenging sometimes to know how to live and work well together. And I'll tell you a bit about where that comes from for me. Is years ago, I'm the only gray-haired person up here, so I'll tell you something about how long ago it was. When I was in my early 20s, I had my challenge came when I had cancer, and I had a very advanced cancer process, and I had been a teacher, so I can relate to the teachers in the crowd here, and I loved teaching, but I got sick, and when they diagnosed me, I had to go for treatments, and I was young. At that time, I was in my early 20s, and I couldn't stand not being able to work or do what I loved, so I took a little part-time job at a daycare so I could still work with kids. But what happened was I lost my long-term disability. So that meant I had no insurance, nothing. And I still had some pretty major medical treatments to deal with. So I didn't know what to do. So I walked to the hospital administrator. I don't think you can do this anymore. Things have gotten a lot more complicated, including insurance. But I walked in and I said, I would like to work in your hospital because you guys are doing my treatments and I need to be able to pay you. So will you let me work for you? And they gave me a job, and my job was to work in the pharmacy. I had a couple different jobs, but I'd move around. And I worked in the pharmacy, and I would come in and distribute medications, IVs, and one of the things I did on a regular basis was also deliver the chemo drugs. So just so happened, there was a lot of camaraderie in the pharmacy department. But one thing you may not know is when pharmacists are working on chemo drugs, I don't know if this is still true, but it was then, they're fairly toxic, and they would dress in these like spacesuits, like to get the drugs made, so that they wouldn't be in contact with them. And I would go in after they were complete to pick them up. And on a regular basis, we had our relationship, and I would listen to them do what they did. And one day I came in, and it was the first time any of them ever realized, this is your bag of chemo. And they had been joking and people do what they do to do their jobs. And I didn't know, felt a little awkward, but I said, yes, that's my bag. And it changed the conversation. We actually spent quite a bit of time talking because they were like, wow, we had no idea who these bags were going to. We just do our thing. And I said, I know, and this is what I do. I deliver them, and then, I get my treatments. And that was the first time that I really realized how important it is sometimes to break down the story you have about people. Because most people have no clue what I've done in my life or how I've done it or how I've lived or, I would show up for my job and most of the people never knew that, I was doing it because I had to pay for my chemo or any of that. But I really did get that work was personal. And the more that I was willing to show up and be myself in it and say, yeah, I'm the person on the other side of that bag, that's me, the more alive I became. And the more I believed in, work is personal. Most everything we do, there's somebody on the other side that is a person and should be considered. So, I went on in my life. I went through 4 different cancers, never went back to teaching, but I became passionate about talking with people about their differences. That was my thing. I really liked, believe it or not, conflict, because I found that when most of the time smart people got together, they would have a hard time talking to each other if one or the other thought they were right. And it's not just smart people. I think it happens in couples as well, and probably anywhere there are more than 2 people. If you get caught in your own idea, you can get really tied up in knots. And so I became very passionate about dealing with differences and helping people kind of bridge conflict. And then I met Chris Marie, and we started our company in Seattle, and we worked primarily with large organizations across the country, over in China, a lot of different places, and pretty much everything I learned boiled down to the same things. People were struggling, one, because they tried to compartmentalize their lives. They tried to, okay, work is work, home is home. They really didn't bring all of themselves to what they did. And because they didn't believe they could. A lot of times there's reasons why people don't. However, what I believe is that, and what I love about living here, is that you can't not bring yourself. You have to, like tomorrow I may see some of you at Coffee Traders or at the Mountain Bowls, or I'll see you somewhere, and you will be a person for me. So I can't pretend that I don't know you. When you're in a big city or a big corporation, you can do that, and you can actually think that you can separate things out. I don't really think you can. I think bottom line is you have to, we're always fairly vulnerable, and sometimes we really get that lesson the hard way. I've gotten it a few times in my life, and I've realized, okay, I can't really look over at anyone and assume that I know better than they do. And I better learn how to be curious and interested in who's sitting on the other side, no matter how good I think I am or how great something has been. So when we moved here, our friends told us, "Are you crazy? You're moving to Montana. You're two women. Montana, this is Seattle." So they're like, "Montana is a very conservative state. You are not going to be okay there. There are people who aren't going to like you." And I have no doubt that there probably are. But when I got here, I was amazed. I was a little nervous when I first saw how many billboards there were with the 10 Commandments, how many times how many different extreme positions there were. And I started to worry, like, well, maybe, I remember the guys that helped us move in said, "You don't need to worry about a security system because everyone here has guns." Not me, And, so I had a few moments where I started to wonder, where have I come? And why have I come here? And then I remembered what I learned from my cancer is, if I show up, no matter how different someone is from me, I can be vulnerable, meaning I'll say what I think, I'll have an opinion, I'll ask for what I want, and I will be curious about who is that other person sitting across from me and why might they be so different. And that's actually why I find living here so exciting, is that there really are some extreme perspectives. Some I don't agree with, but I've always seen this little town come through, even with some very challenging differences. And I am a big believer that you have to dive into the differences. You can't just avoid it. I can't decide that I don't want to talk to people who think differently than me. I remembered a couple times riding up on the chairlift with people who voted very different from me and just having very candid conversations helped me understand why your position is so different from mine. And every once in a while, someone will get really pissed at me and, they're not interested. And I've had a few. I once was at North Valley Hospital and was waiting for my partner who was back getting something done, and there was some gentleman at a table saying some pretty nasty things about, let's just say they were very homophobic. And I was sitting, listening to them, and I just decided to go sit down at their table and say hello. And they actually were sort of intrigued about how I got there, what I did. We talked about, the work I did with leaders and teams and da-da. And then they asked me eventually, why was I here? And I couldn't resist. I said, my wife is in the back. Well, there was a bit of jaw dropping, and I could tell I had rattled the cage a little bit. My style is to be fairly direct and blunt. And they kind of looked at me, and I said, "I hope that doesn't offend you." And then I said, "Because I've enjoyed talking to you." And they just politely said, "Well, it was very nice to meet you." One of them did say that they would pray for me, and I was like, "I'm glad. Go, please do. But I'm glad we had this conversation because I heard what you said before, and I hope you'll remember I'm a person. And that's always sort of been the philosophy that I've had about anything. If you got to dive into it. I mean, I learned with my cancer, choose life, courageously or fearlessly dive into whatever it is right in front of you. And I think living and working in a small town, especially if we want to live well together, we have to be able to do that. You can't avoid each other. I can't pretend that somebody doesn't think differently than me and get interested in it. So that's my passion, and I take it into the business world all the time. And I'm also bring it. We wrote our first book, The Beauty of Conflict for Teams. And yes, here it is. Here, have you forward? No, okay. And we're about to come up with another one, The Beauty of Conflict for Couples, because we do think that it is, those are two things we know a lot about. We've been in a lot of conflict, and we didn't call it the comfort and ease of conflict. We called it the beauty of conflict, because beauty is deep, it's rich, it has depth, but it's not easy, and it's not comfortable. And sometimes you have to sit at a table with somebody you know may hate you and try to get them to see something different. And that's what I think we do here, and I'm proud of that. So, thank you.